DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Up the wires! Yeah, I know, season doesn't kick off till March. We can talk Warriors 12 months a year, can't we? Tony Kemp, former Warriors coach, very proud, former Kiwi, about to join us. Just before we do, though, and look back at the interview we had with Andrew Webster last week, if you're enjoying what you're listening to and liking what you're looking at, then please, small request for you. Can you like, share, subscribe, follow, tell a friend, leave a comment, all of that kind of stuff. Our longer form interviews are all available on the DSPN YouTube channel as well. If you can click subscribe, that would be magnificent. We're trying to get to 5,000 subscribers before Christmas, and all your help and assistance is greatly appreciated. Tony, welcome back.
Hello, Marty. Good to see you again, mate.
Andrew Webster last week. Great long chat with him. We've separated 4 different quotes, and we want you to have a listen to these and give us your thoughts on the first one, in no particular order. Is the squad that you've got, your 30 in place, is it good enough for next year?
The thing about it is I think we've got a forward pack, if I go into detail, that can win the comp at any club. I mean, we've got 4 really good halfbacks with great depth. I feel like those 4 guys, need to step up and take the reins. So I'm happy with who we've got, and I'm confident that they can do that. I think our outside backs, are really brave, carry the football well. Is there things they've got to work on? Of course, but I think their contribution is really big each week. But the big thing is, can we bring it all together? And that, just because I like it on paper and I think we've got potential, doesn't mean we're going to do it. That's the difference. How do we transition it? And if you told me, righto, why don't you go and get these 17 players, I can guarantee they wouldn't fit into your salary cap. You know what I mean? So, we think we're really balanced and we're happy with the position we're in.
Okay, but to unpack there, we'll isolate and separate talking about the halves and also talking about RTS. But just his comments there that he thinks it's a really well-balanced squad and he's more than happy with the names that he's got.
Well, I think the first thing you need to understand, Marty, is the top 30. All right, so each club has to contract 30 players, basically. And how they do that is they break down the numbers in each of the areas. So let's talk about the spine. So the spine is about 8 to 10 players. That take up a third of your players. Then you look at your prop sets, about 2 to 4 decent front rowers. The same with your second rowers. When you look at your outside backs and your centres, it's about 5 or 6 players. And then you've got your fullbacks and your wingers as well, sort of anywhere between 2 or 3 at the top. And when you look at other teams, so let's have a look at the top 3 last year, the Panthers, Melbourne and the Roosters. You'd have to say that Teddy Peppenhausen and Dylan Edwards, they actually only take up 1 spot. And then you start to look at the depth of the side. So you look at your centres and your wingers and where you can actually build on that. If you go down to Manly and they've got Trebojevic there, and you go down to South and they've got Latrell Mitchell there, if they're out injured, what did their depth look like?
Right.
So you start to look at the depth in your squad and how significant the depth is.
So what you're saying is you're looking at not the number 1 player, but maybe the number 2, maybe the number 3 player in that position.
Well, let's have a look at Melbourne, for instance. Okay, so they lost their spine players regularly last year. So Jerome Hughes was out, Peppenhausen was out for a significant time, Munster with the groin injury, Harry Grant was the mainstay in that sign. But, Fa'alogo came into the back there. They didn't mind if Peppenhausen went this year because they had someone who could step straight in. You look at Wishart, everyone wants Wishart.
Yeah, he was brilliant, wasn't he?
You know what I mean? And then, of course, when you're looking at those type of players that are filling in those spots, around 1 or 2 players that are out, well, they don't really lose a hell of a lot. So when Webster's saying, I'm quite happy with my squad, you'd be quite happy with your first team that is competitive, but are you happy with who you're going to fill in the gaps with?
That's my point as well, because there are going to be injuries. There always is attrition. And we had almost a B team play against Penrith. They played out of their brains. But can you rely on that every week? The other question I've got when you talk about the squad, Tony, is that how many other teams want our guys? Don't you have to measure it like that as well?
Well, you do start to measure them from 1 to 17. That's a benchmarking. It's like when Billy Slater played, he was the number 1 fullback. Where was our fullback compared to that? Roger Tuivasa-Sheck picked up the Daily M. You'd have to say at that stage he was probably the number 1 fullback in the competition. Sonny Bill Williams, Joey Manu, and it goes on and on. So when you're breaking them down from 1 to 17, if you have a look at the Warriors, you'd have to say, is Tanner Boyd in the top 4 halfbacks that they've just signed from the Gold Coast. He's replacing Sean Johnson. I'd have to say, out of him, Tamari Martin, and Luke Metcalf, are they in the top 8 halves in the competition? So, you know, you're looking at some pretty good halves running around, some pretty good 5'8s. And then you got to go down to your hook and you say, well, where's Luke, a young Egan in that? When you go down through the top 8. So right at the beginning, the side that gets steered around and the people that cause all the havoc, have you got a top 8 spine? So that's the first question. Then when you're looking at the rest of the squad, where's your outside backs, your middle forwards and your edge forwards, how many of them are in the top 8?
Right.
You know, and you arguably lost the number 1 front row in the competition, and you've replaced them with an ageing Fisher Harris. You know what I mean?
It's not a bad replacement.
It's not. It's a very good replacement, and I'd say that the replacement was also bought for recruitment purposes and for for driving the team. Yeah. You know, I've got someone who's been in there. He's won 4 premierships, so you've got someone who knows how to win, knows how to train. So the ethic in and around Fisher Harris is probably more around the value that he's giving holistically, as opposed to what he's going to just do on the football field.
Let's separate and isolate then. Quote number 2. Do you have a starting 6 and 7 in mind right now?
No. Well, yes and no. I mean, I think there's guys that showed us last year of what they're about, and I feel like we've all got that in our head, either that memory or that moment or that 3 or 4 weeks where they were really good, or 3 or 4 weeks when they need to work on it. So, but yeah, it's an open opportunity, you know, like for everyone.
See, I find that worrisome, in that, you know, before the season starts, you've got to know who these guys are, and that's what you've just been talking about before. It's really important, and to think that I'll try this guy and then he may or may not work out. He's got to have in his mind, doesn't he, Andrew Webster, that 6 and 7, who are they? And again, are they strong enough? And you're saying, do those names feature in the top 8 players in those positions?
Yeah, and you know, a bit of philosophy from Andrew in that answer to you, Marty, because you don't want your players to know that they're getting a leg up before any other player this time of year, because the training, he needs to make them train like they're going to play, and each one of them needs to step up if that injury comes about. So he's not going to give you the names, but here's the 5. So I think they've got 5 halves. Out of between the 5 and 8 names, I think they've got 5 halves. You've got young Jet Cleary, so he's the up and comer. All right, he's the unknown.
Does he play next year?
Well, depending on injuries, he might have to.
Right.
You know, so, you know, you'd have to say if it was this year, he would have played. Okay, so...
Okay. I just think maybe he's still a little green, but I suppose, you know, what?
Well, he is. So, but he's...
Brad Fittler was 18 when he started. I mean, if you're good enough, if you're young enough, you're good enough. Well, you're old enough, you're good enough.
He's pretty special, just like his brother, though, isn't it? What they're hoping is that they got another Nathan coming through.
Yes, of course, mate, absolutely.
So who knows? He's the unknown. I think, you know, reading between the lines there, what he's talking about is how well... Chanel played alongside Tamari Martin. So he's basically saying in those 5 weeks, they sort of showed us what we can do. He's probably going to start that way. But he's gone and got in the market, which is a saturated market, unsaturated market when it comes to halfbacks. And he's had to go and get Tanner Boyd out of the Gold Coast. Now, it's not an inspiring signing as a halfback if you wanted to finish in the top 4. And can he carry the side around? You know what I mean? So that's 4 of your halfbacks, and of course at the back of it, Luke Metcalf has to come back. And can he stay fit? So Luke Metcalf played pretty well when he was on the pitch last year, but he played very little football. I think the kid holds down the number 6 jersey, but can he stay on the football field?
Do we have a kicking game, sufficient kicking game left and right with those names?
Well, that's again, I think they can have a decent kicking game.
Well, it's got to be better than decent, Tony.
Well,
to make top 4.
Yeah, you're dead right. You know, if you're looking at again Nathan Cleary, the way that he kicks, and Jerome Hughes, the way that they kick, out of hooker and out of first receiver, they're challenging kicks. Yeah. You know, every kick is on the money.
Yeah.
It wins your football games. You got to say, if Nathan Cleary didn't play in that grand final, Melbourne probably win it. You know, that's the importance of his kicking game and keeping them in the games, but making other teams stick with them.
That's right.
You know, like if you're coming up against Melbourne, you have to stick with them, and hopefully they're going to fall off before you do. But if Nathan Cleary's playing, of course not. And that's the question you've got to ask when you see. I'm just trying to define your questions. Is the kicking game as good as Nathan Cleary's?
No,
he's number 1. He's
well,
a
of course
benchmark.
not. No, of course not. No, but does it have to be? All right, quote number 3. Let me be the first to ask you about Roger before the season even starts, because I know that everyone's going to ask you this question as well. Where does he play? You still got him in the centres?
No, I'm keeping that private this year. I think I learnt my lesson last year. Just I can get that asked a different way this year, and when the season starts, everyone will know.
Right.
That might create more.
Good answer.
Questions. It might create more questions, but I'm going to keep that to myself.
Great
at this
answer.
stage. And
I like that, because I think what he's saying there and what he's admitting is that he almost painted himself in a corner last year, and there's a bit of stubbornness about it, wasn't there? That no, Roger is definitely going to be playing here. And can I read between the lines and say that there's a good chance, I think, listening to that Roger might have a number one on his back?
Yeah, and of course that's the assumption you're going to make, and you saw Chance playing the centres for the Kiwis, or 5'8" for the Kiwis. So he's more movable than Roger is, and of course he's got the legs too. As an ageing Roger Tuivasa-Sheck probably comes to the twilight of his year. I think he missed the boat last year, and apart from not playing Roger at fullback more regularly, he could have played him there. I think Roger was by far the best pick there, as opposed to putting him out on the wing or letting him struggle in centre. He put himself in a corner last year because he said he's going to be like Joey Manu. But he told all the people around him, and they went and told everyone around them, and then all of a sudden out in the public, we've got Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, he's going to be playing this roaming role, just like Joey Manu, and we're going to have a Joey Manu in our team. That's at the time when you're talking benchmarks, we've got the number 2 centre in the world, because Joey Manu's number 1.
Yeah.
All right, well, Roger, he didn't feature in the top 8 centres in the year, and he struggled away there playing in the centres.
Has he still got at least one more good season, or maybe 2 left in him?
I think he's got a good season if he plays fullback. If I was a NRL coach and looking at replacing a fullback, and Roger Tuivasa-Sheck's name was thrown at me, I'd take it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I think he's got.
How so worthy in your squad, wouldn't he? Any squad.
And again, the professionalism, along with Fisher Harris, that ageing senior player
Who's a winner,
who's won a competition. That's the sort of stuff that he'll be looking at, Webster, to bring this team together. It still doesn't fix up your problem at 9, 6, 7 and 1.
Final quote. Do you feel that you were a better coach at the end of last season than you were the season before? And if so, how?
Well, definitely a better coach because of the experiences. I mean, everything was not rosy in year one by any means, but when you're winning, the plan is to learn whilst winning, but we all know you learn a lot from losing. So definitely a better coach. I mean, in a year experience, I've had a million different scenarios being thrown at me that I didn't get in year one. So therefore, if I face those challenges again, I know what to do. Still really proud of a lot of ways we handled things and the way I did personally. But there's things I definitely know I didn't do as well as I would have liked, or if I had hindsight, I thought, when that situation comes next time, I know how to deal with it.
Hindsight, I mean, you've been in this coaching position before, mate. I mean, you don't get that, and you don't ever have that luxury. Do you like hearing that as well? The thing I really like about Andrew is he's really honest. He'll answer all the questions for you. He doesn't try and dodge or shirk anything, does he? And he's kind of admitting there that, hey, I did get some things wrong. I don't need to know what those things are because that's in his own head, and obviously you don't want that information out there for everyone else. But just in terms of what you've observed of him, Coach, year 1 to year 2. Yeah,
look, I like Andrew Webster as a coach. I think he's he's got a manner about him. He doesn't shirk the hard questions, and he even listening to that answer, he's starting to answer the questions with a little bit more credibility. So he's not jumping the gun. And he's basically saying, hey, I'm going to keep that to myself. I don't need to share that with you. That's for me to take away and ruminate on and hopefully become a better coach. So to answer your question, yeah, I do think he's a better coach. I think he's a wiser coach because now he's been at the bottom of the table, and he knows what that feeling's like. He hasn't had the pressure put on him like New Zealand used to have when we had all those media blokes in the background who would just fire into you,
snarling the whole time, mate.
Which is you've got your blinkers on. You've got
if he had this year, first year, as opposed to the year that he had first year, things might be a bit different the way that he's been treated.
Well, that's right, because he was NRL Coach of the Year the first year. So everything went right for me as a game away from the grand final. this year couldn't make the 8. You know, so he'll know that people are looking at him a lot closer this year with the squad that he's got, hoping that he can do better than finishing 13th.
Well, where do they finish then, Tony? Right now, this squad on paper, we started with 30 names. Where do they finish?
Well, here's the first point, Marty. I'm going to make a prediction here after doing the analysis. Go and get $50 and go and put it on Melbourne as soon as the TAB open the odds up. All right, their squad is phenomenal. All right,
if they stay injury free.
Yep. I think they got the depth. This is why I think they win the comp. I think they go one better this year with the players that they have, and they actually win the competition. I think Penrith will struggle a little bit. They'll still be there as long as Nathan Cleary's on the football field.
Well, what happens to the Warriors?
I think they'll struggle to make the 8.
Wow.
Yeah, I just don't think, for me, I think, the forwards, they're pretty stock standard. I think we're really light in the back row. All right, so apart from Nuakore and Barnett that plays a little bit in that back row, and you've got to say now that the number 13 is converted into a middle player with ball playing like Isaiah Yao. So Tohu Harris does that. So does Dylan Walker. You add Fisher Harris to that. I still think when you look at Egan, Tanner Boyd, or any one of Tamari Martin, Chanel Harris-DeVito, or Luke Metcalf, and anyone at fullback, it's got to be between Tane Tuapiki, Chance Nickel-Clockstart and Roger. I just can't see them making the 8. I think the top 3, top 4 are basically the same. Based on the depth that they have. Penrith and this is how they're. You've got to give it credit to their structure and how they buy players. They buy players on the numbers and bank that those players are going to stay on the pitch for the longest time. And I'm talking about their fullbacks, their halves, and their hookers. And you've got to put that down also. And I think some of the people that don't really get the credit are their high-performance managers who work really hard at keeping players on the pitch and preparing them and getting them ready for it. And why I say that is they're the ones in the background that are making sure that the rosters can stay the way that they are and purchase the way that they can. And the Warriors, for me, have to get rid of a bit of dead wood. And I'm talking in that department. So in the coaching department and that, you got people in there that have been there for way too long. You need to start bringing in some of these new thinkers. And that will probably help them in the future. But at the moment, when you look at their squad, I think they're fighting for the 8.
DSPN.